Okay, we live. We live. Let me.
Should I call you Malik?
Yes, yeah, and it's Sheryll Cashin, correct?
Yeah, you could call me Sheryl.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful.
I'm Malik from Malik Books. I'm located in the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall and the Fox Hills Mall. We specialize in African American books, diversity books. We also have a large selection of children books because children are 100% of our future. Malik Books is the total African American experience of pride, of culture, of self-esteem, self-awareness, where we give voice to the voiceless. Malik Books desires to transform your life with the Nipsey Hussle reading list. Malik Books designed the Nipsey Hussle pack, which is 4 books from the Nipsey Hussle reading list that was the most significant books to help transform and empower Nipsey Hussle's life. In addition to books, we also offer a variety of gifts full of African American Afrocentric expression. We have journals, planners, tote bags, puzzles, steel bottle and travel cups, backpack. We believe at Malik Books, change your thoughts, change your life. Malik Books is just not a bookstore. We do a lot of outreach and we serve books to kids that are in need. Well, my affirmation I would like to give to the world is to find yourself, be yourself, act like yourself. And books are a major part of growing into yourself.
Well. I hope everybody enjoyed that introduction to Malik Books. There's no really need for me to give any further introduction about Malik. I want to introduce you to Sheryll Cahsin, who wrote this wonderful and timely book, particularly in this day and time that we living in, called White Space, Black Hood. Let me tell you a little bit about Sheryll Cahsin.
Cashin.
Cashin, my sorry, Sheryll Cashin. That's right. Sheryll Cashin. Writes about race relations and inequality in America. Her new book, White Space, Black Hood, Opportunity, Hurting, and Segregation in the Age of Inequality, shows how the government creates ghettos and influence white space and entrench a system of American residential caste that is, this word here, Lipichin of U.S. inequality, and issues a class of abolish. Her book, Living Interracial Intimacy in America and a Threat to White Supremacy, explores the history and future of interracial intimacy, how white supremacy has constructed and how culturally allies may yet kill it. Her book, she wrote a lot of books. This ain't no one-time author. This is an author that has written many other books. The Failure of Integration. She was a piece she wrote for the New York Times. She's a frequent contributor on written commentaries for the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, and The Roots, and is currently a contributing editor in the Political magazine. Cashin is a professor of law at the Georgetown University, where she teaches constitutional law and race and American law, among other subjects. She is an active member of the Poverty and Race Research Action Council and worked in the Clinton White House as an advisor on urban and economic policy, particularly concerning community development and inner city neighborhood. She was a law clerk to U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. Cashin was born. Did I get that name right?
Cashin, you got it.
Cashin was born and raised in Huntsville, Alabama, where her parents were political activists. She currently resides in Washington, D.C. with her husband and 2 sons. Let me introduce you to Sheryll Cashin, the author of White Space and Black Hood. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Malik. Your store looks delicious. I can't wait. The next time I come to LA, me and my husband are going to come see it. My husband's aunt and uncle live in, what is it called? Fox Hills? That's not too far from one of your stores, right?
That's exactly where the second location is at. It used to be called Fox Hills Mall.
Okay. We're going to come to one or both.
Yes, yeah. I would love to meet you in person. I enjoyed immensely reading your book. You have some big time, accolades and reviews on your book. Henry Louis Gates, as one of them, reviewed your book and loved it. Had nothing but good things to say. How timely and scholarly your book was. As a matter of fact, I just heard from the Congression that Maxine Waters at a hearing this week even talked and praised your book. Tell us about that and how that felt.
Oh, that was fabulous. That was really, I almost wanted to cry, but I got invited, I think because of not just the book, but a very, hard-hitting op-ed I wrote about it in Politico. She one of her subcommittees, she's the chairwoman of the House, I guess it's Financial Services Committee, but one of her subcommittees was having a hearing about exclusionary zoning. One of the main reasons you have communities of abundance and communities of concentrated poverty is through the zoning code. So I got invited to testify, and I was just blown away. She mentioned the book, and she praised it, and she said, "I so appreciate you." And I was like, "Girl, I appreciate you."
Right. That's a huge, immense plug.
Right.
And unexpected.
No, it was totally unexpected. But one thing I love about Maxine Waters is, she always has her eye clearly on helping people and giving voice to people who are powerless, and frankly, I had the same motivation in writing this book.
Well, I could tell this book right here was written. I mean, you name dates, you name people, you give, an enormous amount of information. It read like it was an academic as well as a good read.
Well, thank you, Malik. Thank you. That's the highest praise, because you can see. I don't know if you can see my little library, but you see my man up there, right? You see it, right. Yes. My goal was to be, frankly, literary, to write something. I mean, this is my 5th book, right? I have a memoir, The Agitator's Daughter. My father's the agitator, right? But I have tried really, really hard to learn the craft of writing. And so I tell this story of people trapped in the hood. I call people trapped in the hood, and I say that term with affection, right? For me, it's a term of affection, right? I call the people trapped in high poverty neighborhoods descendants.
Yes.
But I really do try to tell this story of why it is we have serious, vicious segregation that automatically lifts up some people and automatically keeps some other people down through the stories, stories of descendants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you give a lot of stories. You talk to a lot of people. I mean, just to be able to put all that together And to have, and then have a direct message, is challenging in itself. Reading books that, because you're a professor at Georgetown, so you're academic, you're a lawyer, it's not always easy to write a book that where a person, because they write newspapers on a 5th grade level,
Right.
It's written in a way that to increase sales, not to enrich vocabulary and things of that nature. But so that could be a challenge, because I had a professor who worked at Paradigm, the university out here, and he wrote a book, and he said it was challenging for him to write something that, because you putting your academic scholarship on the line as an academia.
Right. Well, so I actually had to unlearn academic writing, right? After I got tenure, I'd written a lot of academic articles about segregation and the role of the law in it. I decided I wanted to go straight to writing for broad audiences, and I had to unlearn academic writing. But I mean, can I tell the people who are watching, like my 2-minute spiel on the message of what this book is, right?
Absolutely.
So basically what I'm arguing is we have a system of residential caste. Like, every time it seemed like this country had put to bed a peculiar Black subordinating institution, it created another one. From slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration, that's Michelle Alexander, the new Jim Crow, right? To the iconic Black ghetto. And I say that as a descriptor, right? A technical definition of a ghetto is a place where 40% of the people there are poor or higher, right? And what I'm saying is, the primary response to Black people who move from the South, everybody in LA has some relative from Alabama, Mississippi. So, I mean, you just start talking. The grandparents, so many of people out in LA have ancestors that came from the South, right?
Yes.
The primary response to 6 to 7 million Black people moving west and north to escape violence-backed Jim Crow was to contain them in their own neighborhoods, right?
Yes.
Watts was an integrated neighborhood, right? But what happened through government policy, it became very, very Black because government decided, the federal government and the leaders of LA decided to put lots and lots of public housing in Watts and assign only Black people there, right? And so, and I go through the policies, but they contain Black people through violence, through restrictive covenants, to their own neighborhoods, and then they cut them off from all of the traditional investment that has been rained down on white neighborhoods. They cut Black people in particular out of the major wealth building programs this country sponsored, right? And
yes.
Overinvest and exclude in affluent white space, and we disinvest and frankly prey on people in high poverty Black neighborhoods, and then we tell myths about descendants to justify the way things are. And that's what that's what residential caste is. And the final thing I'll say is that it's animated by 3 anti-Black processes. And this isn't the past, this is today. Today, right? This is not the past, right? Boundary maintenance. Most government policies actually encourage rather than discourage segregation. And then it's opportunity hoarding. Most governments, if you look at the data, even Black-led governments are putting more money into white neighborhoods than majority Black and brown neighborhoods. And then the third one is surveillance. And we all see the videos, right?
Yes.
Surveillance by police and surveillance by people who call the police on Black people.
Yeah.
all of that together is a system of residential caste, and it's hard. It's getting harder to get out of the hood, and it's getting harder to get into high opportunity.
Well said. Well said. You just dissect a complicated but yet simple process that's taking hold all over this country. And you know, to be true, a lot of people are not aware on the intricate way this works. That's what your book is, breaking down the geography and how this wealth building takes place and this displacement takes place. And that was one of the questions I was going to ask you about break down residential casting.
Okay. Well, let me pick first, do boundary maintenance, right? So I talked about these 3 different processes, right? So the federal government spends about $10 billion a year to build affordable housing, but most of it gets built in neighborhoods that already have more than their fair share of low-income housing, right?
Yes.
Only like 17% of affordable units get built in high opportunity neighborhoods with great schools, low crime, etc. Right? That's just one example. But you know, I talked about zoning already. But the boundaries are reinforced rather than disrupted, right? And anybody, you know, you probably can name off the top of your head in LA what you know, the high opportunity places, right, that seem to have the best of everything. Great
Beverly Hills.
Right?
Beverly Hills.
Right. Well, the boundaries to the 2 most persistent types of neighborhoods today are high opportunity, poverty-free havens like Beverly Hills, and low opportunity, high poverty, Black and brown neighborhoods. Now, people who you know, pre-civil rights, you know, you'd find a lot of people living together in Black neighborhoods. But, you know, people who can escape concentrated poverty do. And a lot of, you know, high income Black and brown people do, right?
Yeah.
Where do they move to? Do they move to Baldwin Hills? Where do they move to?
Baldwin Hills, now Inglewood.
Right. But so those boundaries have hardened, right? And if you lost the neighborhood lottery and grow up in concentrated poverty, the way it is now is it's more likely that you've got the 4th or 5th generation of poor people living there. They're not going anywhere. They're staying there. So, like, you know, if a poor child, their mother's poor, their grandmother's poor, and their great grandmother who may still be alive. So you got a lot of isolation, right? And they don't have access to their higher income brothers and sisters, and they don't have, because they've left. They've gone to Baldwin Hills or wherever, or the Valley, right?
Yeah, you know this area out here, that's for sure.
Right. And so they also lose economic influence of their higher income brothers and sisters. They lose their political influence, and frankly, there's a lot of othering, you know, class avoidance, right? So that's boundary maintenance. And let me tell you, you know, high poverty areas in the schools, you know, they get like the least talented teachers, right? The least experienced teachers. They get the least resources, right? I'm a Christian, right? If you like you, the last should be first, right? Matthew, the last should be first. But in the United States of America, we do the opposite. Our biggest in Europe and elsewhere, they put their most talented teachers and extra resources into disadvantaged places. We do the exact opposite, right? We put our least experienced teachers and the least resources in schools with concentrated poverty. And that's just immoral, right? This is opportunity hoarding now.
Okay.
In this country, we spend, when I say we, I mean government.
Government
spends about $23 billion a year more in majority white school districts than in majority minority school districts that educate the same numbers of people. $23 billion more.
Oh, wow.
You know, so that's what
a huge gap.
Right. It's a huge gap. That's what I mean by geography is central to caste, right? You kind of get locked in if you're in a disadvantaged space. In disadvantaged neighborhoods, you know, the school, your roads, your pipes. You see all these water crises where Black people from Flint and other cities, Newark, are drinking lead, are exposed to lead through their pipes.
Yes.
Right. I cite social science, data which shows that this has been going on since the 40s, right? Infrastructure in Black neighborhoods, from sewers to pipes to roads to, you know, even green space in parks, right?
Yes. Yes.
They sort of intentionally set Black people apart.
Yes. Yes.
Just disinvested in all of that. And what happened? Black neighborhoods were redlined beginning in the 30s. 8 decades on, the same Black neighborhoods that were redlined, marked D as hazardous, are segregated and distressed. 8 decades later. But what happens is, and then I'll stop talking and let you ask me another question. What happens is people who have no intimate experience with Black people tend to associate the distress in their disinvested, defunded neighborhoods with Blackness, right? And that fuels the avoidance of Blackness, and then we're still stuck in this, you know,
right? Yeah. Vicious cycle,
right?
Vicious cycle. It's like, when does it end? We take one step forward, and then next we get knocked back another step. You know, it's like we stand on the same treadmill going in a circle, man. Not, you know, because we own it. My understanding is that we own less in terms of land today than we did, after slavery.
Absolutely. Well, I know we own a lot less than we did, like in the 1890s, 1870s, 1880s.
Yes.
I wrote this piece about Black farmers in Politico this summer. I can't remember the number, but a shocking amount of land, acreage, was just taken from Black people. I cite that, right? And in fact, the Black-white homeownership gap today is the same as it was back in 1890. So much Black equity in land, in housing, was lost. Frankly, I shouldn't say lost, was stolen. Taken from Black people by predatory lenders. You know, we had that huge foreclosure crisis.
Right.
2009, 2010. And Black neighborhoods have never recovered from that. And in fact, what's happened is these, what do they call them? Private equity investors. What did they do after you got all these foreclosures in Black neighborhoods? They've been going into Black neighborhoods, buying foreclosed properties. They might buy a house for $5,000 that was foreclosed, and then turn around and put it on the market for sale for $30,000 the next day. And what they're doing is selling it back to Black people on installment contracts. It's like buying a house on layaway, right? Where you don't accumulate any equity.
Wow.
As you pay. And if you make one late payment, you're in default. And these contracts are designed to fail. They want you to fail because they'll take your money and churn it and just sell it back to somebody else. And this is super rich, predominantly white private equity stealing the essential dollar, stealing the wealth, the money that Black
Yes,
and brown essential workers, which they're transferring their money to financial titans. It's immoral.
absolutely immoral. And land, at one point in time in the history of America, slavery, the slaves were worth more than the land.
Mm-hmm.
After slavery, the land was worth more than the slave. And so land is a valuable resource. And we have to do a better job in the Black communities all across this nation to educate people the value of home ownership and land. We know that there's a lot of issues, and this is one of them. This is a major one. In fact, I wanted you to elaborate on the destructive force of eminent domain and how that played a part in these developers and government agencies invoking eminent domain to land grab our wealth.
Right. So I'm gonna tell you first a personal story. It's not in the book, but it's in my memoir, right? Agitator's Daughter. So I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. In the 60s, part of that urban renewal, which James Baldwin called Negro removal, city of Huntsville, Alabama, took my father's dental office and his childhood home by eminent domain and put a parking lot there. And within a couple of years, a bank owned that property. And to this day, there's a bank and a parking lot where my father's office and my grandmother's home used to be. Right. And this happened to many Black people used to live in a lot of neighborhoods that were right downtown where all the economic action was, right? So the federal government basically spent $3 billion, in present day dollars it would be a lot more, paid cities to help them cleanse Black people, mow down their neighborhoods, and repurpose Black occupied neighborhoods for the sort of central city downtown, basically for white professionals, right?
Yes.
A lot of these neighborhoods, they weren't blighted; they were vital neighborhoods. And then the story I tell in the first chapter of the book is Baltimore, and I take the whole history of Baltimore from 1890 to the present and show all of these anti-Black policies and the cumulative blunt force trauma that the Black neighborhoods of Baltimore endure. So, and on top of eminent domain used for Negro removal, then they piled on with the interstate highway program. Almost everywhere the interstate highways were run through cities, if there were a lot of Black people, they tended to intentionally mow right through Black neighborhoods, right? And a lot of times these were like, vital economic corridors, right? The sweet of neighborhood.
Prime real estate.
Right. So, you got a lot of intentional plunder and trauma at the hands of federal and local government in, historically Black neighborhoods.
I think your book did a good job pointing out a lot of these things, because this is forgotten history, or just not a history just most of us just not aware of. You'll hear gentrification, but you don't know the background behind how that's used and how that's done. You'll hear words like blockbusting, staring, and redlining, but a lot of people don't know what that stuff means when they come across those terms.
Right. Well, you can read just the first chapter of my book and get the whole story in one place. But I'll say again, I moved through how segregated Black neighborhoods were created, right? I moved through that history and I get to the present really quickly. By chapter 4, we're to the present, right?
Yes.
And the whole rest of the book is about opportunity hoarding and segregation and surveillance of descendants, right? And I just really want people to understand that this is not the past, but anti-Black policies or continue. I mean, you know, I
Yes.
have a chapter on schools, right?
Yes.
But let me tell you, what I'm trying to show is that geography alters politics, right?
Mhm.
First off, the social distinctions that people tend to make about others gets a lot more efficient when you overlay geography. So it's particularly if you have no intimate experience. So it's so much easier to say those people in the hood and have all these myths about what goes on there. It's so much easier to and I have a chapter called ghetto mythology, right?
Yeah.
All these words that are associated with blackness and the hood. Okay.
Yes.
All
Yes.
the words: thug, super predator, welfare queen,
Yes. Yes.
ghetto, right?
Yes. Yes.
And some of our own people use those words.
Yeah. Yeah. We do. Yeah.
What I show is that the main people who participate in these are dog whistles, right? Who participate in this anti-black rhetoric are politicians, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And U.S. presidents have been the biggest ones. You know, Donald Trump, when he was running for president the first time and running for re-election the second time, if you notice, every time he referred to Democratic run cities that had a lot of black people in them, he would use the word infested. So, you know, he would get in a pissing match or tweet pissing match with the late great Congressman John Lewis and say, why don't you go back to your violence infested, rat infested city and solve it? You know, he associated. I mean, in one debate in 2016, he said something that made it seem like he really believed all black people lived in the inner city, right? But he, you know, when he was running, you know, and then Law and Order, right?
Right.
I thought we
know that's a dog whistle for sure.
Yeah, right.
We know that's going to incite white people, you know, to stand behind you because to keep us in check, like we so violent, you know.
Right. But he used that. You remember in the summer of 2020, when there were all these social protests going on, peaceful social protests going on, right? After poor George Floyd's slow execution, right? You had 20 million people protesting all across the United States, holding up signs saying Black Lives Matter, you know, and then you also had these police killings, right?
Yes.
And you know, he clearly was siding with his rhetoric. He was saying to white suburban voters, you know, you should thank me. I repealed Obama's affirmatively furthering fair housing. I've saved you from high crime and invaders, right? You know,
right.
All of his rhetoric was playing to white identity politics.
Absolutely.
And stoking fear, right? But
that's one of the areas when reading your book about the stoking the fear, because when I was reading it, you have a lot of people, a lot of quotes, but it appears to be a common denominator. And what I considered that denominator was fear. Was the use of fear in order to maintain control and to rally people against the progress of blacks and to keep us in a place that stagnate us, to control us.
Right. And the hood, you know, actually, frankly, the ghetto, that's what it was called when it was constructed, you know, is a mechanism of social control, right? It is, exit is improbable in very high poverty places. And there's no mistake about it. And those places are occupied by the police. They are over policed. And meanwhile, that fear is why it makes it so hard to integrate schools or integrate neighborhoods or even get affordable public transportation from poor neighborhoods to job-rich centers. I tell that story about Baltimore. People don't even forget about integrating neighborhoods. A lot of people in higher percentage, they don't want anybody to be able to get on a bus to get to a job near where they live, right?
Well, I read a long time ago, Machiavelli, he taught rulers in Europe the power of fear. This has been a tactic that they've been using for a long time. The Willie Lynch letter, everybody read that, uses fear to control. That's a tactic, that has been used for a long time to control and divide and manipulate people.
Right. It's sad to say, Malik, you've really hit on a very important point. It is so much easier to play to people's fears than to, try to build bridges for saner public policies that bring all people along. And I fear that the politics of fear is going to be around for a while. Now I do think that we have some serious progress because, I'm from Alabama, and, the Democrats, when my father and mom were like really getting deep involved in desegregating politics. My father ran for governor against George Wallace in 1970, right?
Oh, wow.
Started an independent political party in Alabama when the regular Democratic Party was dominated by George Wallace and was explicitly committed to white supremacy. So I associate Democratic politics with this anti-Black, dog whistling, law and order rhetoric. And Wallace was, he did pretty well in his runs for president with some of that rhetoric. And then Nixon picked it up, right? I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Oh, here's my point. That kind of rhetoric has been basically almost, as far as for the most part, eliminated from Democratic politics, right? It's a non-starter in statewide, or if you're running for statewide or national office as a Democrat, it's a non-starter for you to engage in that kind of rhetoric, right? Or anti-immigrant rhetoric, or anti-Muslim rhetoric, right? And poor Biden is having a lot of trouble, but I was very impressed. It's the first time, I started paying attention to presidential politics in '68.
Okay.
My parents attended that raucous Democratic convention in Chicago. I started paying attention then, and I don't recall a presidential candidate since Bobby Kennedy centering racial justice. Biden, he would talk about the Black-white wealth gap. He would talk about racial equity,
Right. That was the shift. That's when the shift of Blacks voting Democratic in the 60s.
Right. And then here's the thing, he's like competing for Black votes, right? Because he knew, I got to win these people in Georgia. I got to win these people. So in the Democratic column, I think, my hope and prayer is that that's the future of discourse around public policy. But, we still have gerrymanders. We still have voter suppression. We still have the veto. What do they call it? I'm forgetting. What's that word for people who can hold up the debate in Congress?
Oh, filibuster.
Filibuster. We still have all these structural things.
Yes.
Disproportionate power to a party that does still participate in dog whistle politics, right?
Yeah.
But we have to talk about what to do about it.
You can't address your book, because your book addresses the geography and the discrimination and the racist policies that have caused segregation and so forth. And you can't really, and you talk about all sides and all, on this issue, because as I was reading, because we talk about segregation exists in the North as well as in the South, but yet when people think of segregation, they only think of the South. But when I was reading your book, I felt that, hey, that the North was the primary architect of the strategies that the South used to divide and conquer and use.
So it's so true. It's so true. New York City is one of the most segregated cities in America, right? See, the South had Jim Crow as a mechanism of social control, right? So North, Midwest, West, right? They come up with geography as the mechanism of social control, right? And levels of segregation are highest in these big northern and midwestern cities where a lot of Black great migrants left. And you could think, I mean, you could tick them up: Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Buffalo, New York, Newark, places where a lot of the ancestors went. Now, there's a reverse migration. People had ironically, in terms of residential segregation, the South and the West are better, but that doesn't mean there are iconic high poverty places that people avoid.
Right.
In LA, a lot of other places, right? So, but that it's true. It's true. And actually, after the North and the Midwest invented these mechanisms, I mean, the South started to replicate that too. Everybody knows where the boundaries are.
Well, yeah, but the boundaries exist. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's like the yin and the yang. It's like, okay, today let's go in this direction, and some go, and then there's others that say, nah, I ain't ready for that change. I think I like it the way things are. Mm-hmm. And they tend to go either stagnate right there in that position or go in the opposite position. And that's kind of, to me, that's kind of the situation in America, and this great divide is that as we make progress, there's still elements of people, large segments of people who just don't want to change and like things the way they are and want to keep things, to go back the way they used to be.
Well, let me say this. The majority of people in the United States cannot afford to buy their way into very high opportunity places. The price of the ticket is unbelievable, right? Out of reach, right? And yet the people who are excluded from high opportunity areas, which is the vast majority of people, are subsidizing those areas with their gas tax dollars. All the golden infrastructure and amenities and stuff that these places have are subsidized by people who are excluded with their gas taxes, their sales taxes, their income taxes, And so I
know all too well. I'm out here in California.
Right.
Everything is taxed. Everything is subsidized. Right. Everything costs more.
Right. So,
and yet we still don't get no better. The poverty rate still going in the opposite direction.
Right. And economic elites, they make it their business to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. Right.
Yes.
So it's structurally, we are not organized in a way, this country is browning, it's becoming, California's already the future of this country, right? Majority minority or majority non-white state, right? That is the way the whole country is going, right? Yeah. But we are not ordered in a way to bring opportunity to all of these people, right? And we do not see these beautiful, particularly beautiful brown and Black children who the majority of Black and brown children in the U.S. attend segregated, underfunded schools. We don't see them as assets to be invested in, to be lifted up, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, we prey on children too with the school to prison pipeline. So, in my final chapter, though, not to leave everybody hopeless, but
we're gonna focus on them solutions because you know, you didn't broke down, you know, the geography, the blockbusting, the redlining, and how land builds wealth, and how we disproportionate our eminent domain destroy these black hoods, and how all of this history in America has just been despair. And when it comes to the progress, but let's focus on, yes, because you gotta have vision for tomorrow. You gotta have solutions for tomorrow. What can we do?
Right.
We got to change this game. We got to change this landscape. Hey, I tell people all the time, I understand all this exists in this country. I tell the young people, I understand that we dealing with racism, discrimination. But you know what? We got to win despite that. We got to believe that we can be great and overcome despite that. Are we going to just roll over, accept this? No, we ain't. We got to step up. So, Sheryll, tell us about what we can do. Tell us about.
Okay, so my final chapter is entitled Abolition and Repair, right? So the beauty of, once you understand residential caste and the processes of it, the current processes of it, the way forward is obvious. You got to disrupt, dismantle, abolish these anti-Black processes. So that means inclusionary zoning rather than exclusionary zoning. That's what my testimony before the great Maxine Waters was about. It means greenlining rather than redlining Black neighborhoods. I argue that historically defunded Black neighborhoods, and you can find every single neighborhood that was marked with a D for hazardous in the 30s, right? They should be first in line for any new infrastructure dollars. They should be first in line. So racial equity needs to be in the agenda. And I hold up examples of cities that are doing this. You know, Baltimore, Seattle, and Minneapolis are examples. They have it's legally required. They do a neighborhood analysis in their budgeting. They look at where they've been spending dollars, and they say, no, we need to have more racial equity in our spending, you know, and they create funds to put extra dollars into historically defunded Black neighborhoods, history, you know, and that you can do that with any historically defunded neighborhoods. It just happens to be the case that most of the historically defunded neighborhoods are majority Black, right? So racial equity needs to be the new politics, particularly of cities. And the beauty of that is that, you know, cities tend to be more progressive, you know, and the allies, and we have a lot of them.
Yes.
The allies who have these beautiful signs. I'm in an integrated neighborhood with a lot of white neighbors who still have Black Lives Matter signs in their yards, right? That you know, the allies need to support this agenda, right? Absolutely. You know, we need to have multiracial power where you run for mayor, you run for city council, you know, you got to get to majority power to change the policies and focus on racial equity while you're fighting the battle of inclusion, which is a long battle, as we know. Right? And then, you know, right. And then like the humanization and care of descendants rather than approaching us. I'm a descendant. I'm too, right? I'm a descendant of enslavers and enslaved, right? Humanization and care rather than predatory, punitive approaches, right? And I hold up examples like I basically say, and it may sound Pollyannish, but if you change the lens from presumed thug to presumed citizen, and frankly, I call for a lens of love. But if you do that, right, it frees you up to focus on public policies that have been shown to work and that often prosper. So I hold up Richmond, California, which came up with a peacemaker fellowship, right? They knew that the 24 guys who were likely to pull the trigger, who were really involved with gun violence, and they did something really innovative. They said, why don't we wrap them in love and 24/7 care? Offer them an 18-month fellowship. You'll stop hunting. We'll give you an assigned mentor. What do you need? You need a GED. You need a job. You need some you need to get out of here, get out of your environment. And basically that's what they did. And gun violence fell by 55%. I hold up the example, Stockton, California. They came up with the universal basic income pilot. It's miraculous what $500 a month can do for a poor person. They said, we're just going to try this pilot. We're going to give $500 a month to poor people. I think a pilot was like 125 people. And then they followed what happened. It's like, surprise, surprise, when you give $500 a month to poor people that's not tied to anything, they eat better. Their children do better, right?
So don't you think that have an effect on your ambition? I mean, what can we do? What can we do, Sheryll? Because we got to have ambition because
I'll tell
to drive people to want more than $500, you still in poverty.
No, you are. I'm just saying. What I'm saying is that one UBI thing is in and of itself isn't going to save people. But if you have peacemaker fellowships, you have UBI, you make the bus routes from the poorest neighborhoods free, right? Mm-hmm. You put extra resources in the high poverty schools. I hold up the example of LeBron James's
the school.
The school he created. Mm-hmm. He took the least performing kids, the kids who were performing at the lowest level, and said they're the ones who are going to come to this school. They're my chosen ones.
Yeah. And we got to have more of that kind of thing, because we're not short on money. We get $1.4 trillion a year from all the money from working in America or being self-employed or whatever. But money comes through our hands, and we got to do a better job in using the money that we already have, and to leverage that in our resource, our intellect, and to do things that can better us. I always say, because the government can do things, and it has its merit, it has its power, it has its influence, and it can do a tremendous amount of help. But the reality is, a lot of these policies sometimes take too long. In the meantime, we need to find some more outside the box, short-term and long-term solutions.
Okay.
Because we have money. We're not short on money. It's just we short on money. Government for money. But we got the money already. All we got to do is create a black fund.
I agree with everything you're saying about self-help and self-empowerment, using the money we do have wisely. But what I'm saying is government has to stop preying on Black people. We spend a ridiculous amount of money.
How do we get them to stop doing that?
Incarcerate people, right? But if what I give specific examples of giving
the prison industrial complex. You're right. They make a lot of money.
Money is not the issue. It's spending money on punitive policies that do harm, right? For example, Black people don't use drugs more than white people. The percentage of Black people who use drugs is basically the same as whites, right? But particularly marijuana, right? Mm-hmm. But we've spent, ungodly amounts of money to put people in jail for drug use, as opposed to helping people who are addicted. It costs a lot less to help people who are addicted, get off of kick a habit. But we don't invest in that, right? Mm-hmm. So my emphasis, when I say abolition and repair, I'm saying we need governments at all levels to start reprogramming money. I'm not saying abolish the police river, but start investing in strategies that heal and help people, put people in a virtuous cycle where they can move up, as opposed to just holding them down and imprisoning them in disadvantaged places.
I think your book is an attempt to dismantle the system that creates this disparity. How do
dream, brother.
Say that again.
I said we can dream, brother.
Yes, we can. And the income gap is very large. And what are some of your solutions to bridge that gap?
Well, like I said, if we ever get this infrastructure package through Biden and a company trying to get through, or more investments in human infrastructure, I think the state is morally obligated to give priority to the neighborhoods that they've been holding down intentionally, right? And there's so much evidence of that, right? But you said the wealth gap. How do we close that?
Well, yeah, the wealth gap, the income gap, that exists. We have the land gap, we got the education gap, we got the incarceration gap, we got a lot of gaps.
True, but all of those gaps that you mentioned are the result of intentional anti-Black policies. So what we really need more than anything is a majoritarian politics that rejects anti-Blackness, that's willing to see Black people as three-dimensional human beings and assets to this country, particularly the poorest among us, right? And I hold up examples of some cities where the ethos is changing, and you have to have examples to have some hope.
Absolutely.
If Biden had just like 3 or 4 more votes in the Senate, it's amazing what he could do. Right now, one guy, basically one guy from West Virginia is holding up everything. Him and this other woman, right?
Okay.
So it's like Stacey Abrams says, right? We have to continue to mobilize and gather our power and win elections to change policies, right? So
absolutely, because it's a lot of power in his political system in America. I think that we got to also think outside the box, because we can't always rely on these people.
No, I
to do what they say they're gonna do.
In LA, they need to come down to your store and get some inspiration.
Yes. We need to find a way to hold them to their word.
True. That holding people to their word means it's about power, right? And what we have right now is elites who live in their own spaces in direct horizontal competition with non-elite people who are held down elsewhere, and descendants are at the bottom, are the most powerless, right? That's what it means to be a descendant. You're powerless to change the structural things that are set against you. You're not powerless to love yourself and do the best you can for yourself. But I there's a limit to how much I can stomach this pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of rhetoric when affluent parents eliminate every single obstacle for their children. And sometimes they cheat, to get it right. That college cheating scandal, right?
Yeah.
Superhuman to overcome all of the systems set against you in the hood, right? And we will have overcome when you get to be just human, right?
Right.
So,
Yes. That's a challenge.
That's a challenge, right? So, regular folk ride the bus. They don't spread their wings to fly, right? And so they need transportation they can afford. Now, I'm just saying, it's actually the things people need are within our ability to provide.
I always say that, to get what you want in this life, you have to make an investment in it. If somebody give you something, you usually don't appreciate it as if you worked hard for it. If you put an investment, it's like buying a house. You put a down payment in, you feel a little different if somebody just give you the house.
I agree, but I'm just saying that beautiful Black children deserve excellent, well-resourced schools with experienced teachers, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these places are just wretched,
They are. They're warehouses.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Wretched and spirit killing, right?
Yes.
So I'm not going to stop saying that.
We got the one more, and we got the one more, and we can't accept this. You cannot accept this. We got to do
not the structures that are set against far too many Black folks, brown folks. We can't accept it. It's unacceptable.
No, and that's where it starts, And I love your passion. I feel it. You know what I'm saying? And you're not gonna, Hey, they got a lot of spirit killers out there. They destroy your passion, but it takes that kind of drive in order to create change and momentum for a better tomorrow. And I see that in you. I see that.
Thank you. Well, I'm telling you, the next time I find myself in LA, I'm coming into your store.
Sheryll, this has been a very robust and enlightening conversation. Your book has been enlightening. It's a scholarly. I consider it, a great read, a scholarly read, because it's talking about something that's right now, current and relevant. And so it allows us, and it just doesn't point out, but it gives you hope and it gives you solutions. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to have this robust conversation about white space and Black hood, right? White space, Black hood. I appreciate. Thank you. And I wish you all the best. And I'm looking forward to seeing you when you come out on the West.
I'm going down. This has been delightful. Thank you so much, Malik. It's been my great honor to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Be blessed. Appreciate you. Peace.
Peace. Bye-bye.
Bye.